Welcome to the Solo Mo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss the intersection of social, local, and mobile. Our goal is to help you understand these topics so you can integrate them into your marketing and advertising. Today is March 27th, 2012, and this is episode number 12. How's it going, Adam?
It's going all right, man. You and I we think that the world is going to end today, huh? With all the rain going on out here.
Yeah, I was going to say, if this cuts out, it's likely not a Skype problem. It's probably that my house is floating away and we're, it's now a boat. Less a house, more a boat. It is pouring over here.
You were talking about, I forgot when you initially told me how it was raining. I thought of San Francisco because I know you work out there and you previously lived out there. And you actually live a little bit closer to my side. You're on the East Bay, close to the water in Alameda, right?
Yeah, the quaint island known as Alameda.
And so you really literally are kind of floating right now out there.
Yes, and we are actually on an island of an island. We are this little sub-island of Alameda that kind of is connected via a small car bridge. So if all else fails... One bridge, exactly. We've got one little bridge that connects us to the main
nice knowing you, man. Nice knowing you.
Seriously.
Well, you were talking about how your rain gutters were like channeling the wrath of this torrential downpour into one little tiny channel that was bouncing around like a Disney water fountain over at your place.
Yeah, I've got the Vegas style water show going on in the backyard. Now, they designed the house and it's like a tiered roof system. And so the top roof actually just collects water into a gutter, but then just pours it onto the bottom roof, which then collects it again into a gutter, and it all flows down one downspout. And so when it really starts to rain, all this water is just collecting off the house and basically funneling into one point. And so there was so much water coming down. It was just like hitting the bottom of the gutter and just arcing across the backyard like this crazy... it looked like somebody was holding the end of a hose and just like spraying down the backyard. It was ridiculous.
And that's a year. You've been about the first year that you've lived out there, so this is the first time you've seen that much rain over at that place, right?
Well, it feels like every time it rains, we discover that the previous owner did not clean one of the gutters because I have to climb out there and unclog it and keep the water flowing. But yes, slowly discovering all the ways in which this house likes to spit out water when it rains.
And you had to ride the ferry back from work in the rain?
Oh, the ferry ride, both to and from work today, were crazy. It was rocking and rolling, and they actually, normally, people are kind of walking around, they're having drinks, it's a nice place to be, but today the captain gets on the overhead speaker and was like, well, we crossed the bay, we'd appreciate it if everybody just stayed seated, it's going to be a bit of a rocky ride, so got there and back at least, no crazy stories there, but it was definitely...
Was the ferry called the Minnow?
No, thankfully it's a little bigger than that. It's not a bad boat, and it handles the weather pretty well, but it was definitely rocking and rolling today.
Very cool. Well, it's supposed to stop in a few hours and be a little kind of, calm down a bit, I think, throughout the night. But it's funny, the whole entire winter, nothing. And then suddenly it's officially spring and it's a torrential downpour over here.
Yeah.
So, there's all kinds of cool stuff to cover this week. We have a bevy of things that we plucked out of the web this week and wanted to talk about. But just kind of on a side note, because we kind of been off and on talking about Pinterest a bit. Today, only a matter of a few hours ago, it seems that people were talking about the fact that Barack Obama has now joined Pinterest.
Yes. Well, I guess slight clarification on that. The campaign for Barack Obama's 2012 presidential election has joined Pinterest. So,
But most people think Barack Obama joined Pinterest.
sure, I'd imagine most people picture Barack sitting down with maybe a MacBook Air on his lap, and he's browsing his Facebook, he's looking through his Twitter, he's finding those pins and picking out just the right image that's really going to express himself as a person on Pinterest.
He's like, favorite campaign ties.
Oh, that would be great, actually. So far he's got 3,400 followers, and like you said, news just broke that this thing even existed a couple hours ago, so that's not bad. And as we've seen with, when he joined Instagram, it basically overnight he gets, thousands of followers. It gets covered by mainstream news. People jump on and saying, oh, well, I love everything else Obama does. I might as well, follow him here on this new thing called Pinterest. What is that thing? And
I'm Pinterested in it.
I'm Pinterested in this Pinterest thing.
The funny thing is so I did go ahead and follow him. I saw this early this afternoon, and I followed him. And in fact, at that time, it was something around 1,200 people who were following him. So it's about double that now, and it's not like, going off the charts, but I'm sure it will be significant enough to warrant some activity on there for them. But I did see some interesting stuff with their boards and things like that, and ended up actually watching a video that they had on healthcare that was pinned up there. So, and it just kind of got me thinking about, even with a little bit of effort, if you put interesting stuff up, how it has some legs on there. So, and we'll get into that a little bit more after this, with some other things regarding Pinterest. But, I was talking to, your wife, who works at a social media company, a monitoring and management company. And she was telling me about her opinion relating to candidates being on Pinterest. Were you aware of her thoughts on that?
No, actually.
She was telling me a story. I think it was at South by Southwest, of a panel that you guys were at, or that at least she was attending, and how somebody in the audience had mentioned how they thought that Pinterest was somehow this year's influential site for candidates to be on, that, and therefore it would convince her, this person who was saying it would convince this person, or somehow persuade this person to vote for that person if they saw this candidate on Pinterest.
Yeah. It was actually, I'm remembering now. The panel was hosted by Ben Parr, who used to write for Mashable, and it actually featured one of the co-founders of her company, which is Viral Heat. And the person in the comments, basically said, oh, well, the question was posed, what social network should presidential candidates be looking to next? Because the panel itself was on, social media and politics, and how that's affecting the way that we elect people now. And somebody said Pinterest, and of course the obvious retort to that was, well, what is Barack Obama going to pin? I don't necessarily need to know what kind of wedding cake he would want. And so I think it's interesting to see, I'm sure that went through their mind of like, well, what exactly do we want to, include about Obama, and, how deep do we dive into personal interests versus, very campaign focused things. I see they've got the Obama 2012 merchandise board with 7 pins that include things like Obama. Oh, they look like Lululemon pants. They got a full collection of swag if you want to deck yourself out in Obama gear. So it must have been an interesting debate about what types of pins they wanted to put up there.
Yeah, I just kept thinking of your wife and her story as soon as I found that out. Oh, I'd love to hear what she thinks of it.
Yeah, and one of the we talked about President Obama joining Instagram a couple weeks ago, and just looking at it now, he's actually up to 294,000 followers. So, 0 to 100 miles an hour pretty much overnight when you're the president of the United States. I'm sure it doesn't hurt to have every major news organization talking about the fact that you've joined this social network. But the fact that he joined Pinterest made me wonder, is Obama joining your service a sign that you've basically gone mainstream? is this the new test of hey, we got Obama, we're good to go, we're now a mainstream site?
Either that or Bieber, I guess.
I don't know. Bieber's an early adopter. I see him jumping on a lot of things and getting involved. He was actually one of the first celebrities that I saw on Instagram, and I think actually broke Instagram a couple of times. I was listening to, or I think I was reading a post where they said the designers are actually learning lessons about where their service would break when Justin Bieber would post a photo, because they hadn't taken into account what it would look like when 50,000 people liked a photo. So it actually, the number just like stretched outside of the box that it was supposed to go in, because they're like, okay, well, this box looks great when there's 112 likes, but they didn't really anticipate Justin Bieber getting on and having 50,000 girls liking every single photo that he posted. So,
well, not to deviate too much from the show topics, but that reminds me of that thing that happened, I don't know, today or a couple days ago, where he accidentally gave out a phone number with some wrong digit supposedly, and ended up having an elderly couple get bombarded with phone calls that he tweeted. He tweeted this number out and said something like, "Call me." And I don't know why he was doing it, but I guess one digit was off, and ended up bombarding these folks down south with tons and tons of teenage girls giving him a phone, calling them. So,
oh man, I can only imagine what their voicemail recorder sounds like after a half hour of them not answering the phone. It's really ridiculous. The other thing that Obama joining made me wonder, though, is if Pinterest had fixed the issue that they were running into a couple weeks ago, and I think this was also something that we talked about on the show, which was the fact that if you created a group board and then added another user to it, that group board actually showed up on their account, and then they could opt out of it, but it showed up on their account between when you first added them and when they opted out.
I had that issue this week, actually.
Did you really? Were you were added to a board and?
Yeah, like I just suddenly was looking at these boards, my boards, excuse me, and I look and I have this board called Wine and Beats, and luckily I know who that's a brand for somebody that I know, but it wouldn't be a board that I would go ahead and create for myself. And I said somebody had, and unfortunately on my phone I can't opt out of the board there. And so next time I got on a desktop computer, I just jumped on there and took a look, and yep, it was him, and he had invited a whole bunch of people trying to create a community board. Right. But I didn't know it was there until I kind of took a big snapshot of my own boards and saw that this one board that came out of nowhere. And the funny thing was that I saw is that when I went to remove myself from the board, I could remove anybody from the board.
Oh, really?
So I could have gone and removed every single person from the board, and all I was invited. I didn't create it myself. So I do think there's some issues in kind of moderating those boards.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, what's interesting about this is the idea that, Pinterest, despite the fact that they've now got tens of millions of users, is still a very new service, and there's still, quite a few kinks in it that are still getting worked out. And one of those that came to light today was, it was a story unearthed by Gizmodo, and they actually reported on someone who, through a series of scripts, has developed a process where he's kind of gaming the most popular page on Pinterest. So he's basically created a few thousand accounts, and he will actually pin a pin that uses an Amazon affiliate code, and then use, a few hundred of his other accounts to repin this pin, which basically skyrockets it to the top of the most popular page. And then normal users who are just visiting the most popular page to kind of see what's new are seeing these pins, clicking on it, and then actually ordering things through Amazon. And this guy claims to be making, upwards of $3,000 a day just based on affiliate sales through gaming the Pinterest most pin list. And I thought this was actually really fascinating. And I, sort of a range of emotions. I was like, oh, well, why didn't I think of that? That's genius. All the way to, well, what a screwed up system that they have no way of protecting against this, very basic hack. People creating scripts, creating massive amounts of accounts, and then using those accounts to sort of game a ranking system has been around for a long time. That's how, early on, a lot of Twitter users were building up these massive followings, as they had essentially a network of bot accounts that would just follow and pin, or I'm sorry, follow and retweet and favorite at will, and they could kind of direct those towards their own accounts. What was did you get a chance to check this out, and what was your thoughts towards it, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the guy was smart. I mean, he found a way to make money, and people aren't they're not getting duped or scammed or anything. I mean, it goes against the terms of service, I'm sure, for Pinterest, and his, especially being a part of a blog post on a major blog talking about what he did and so on. It is going to get enough attention, of course, to get him and anybody else trying to do this sort of stuff knocked off the site, and they'll put some stuff in place. But I think Pinterest is so busy with other things that, I mean, if they can't even lock down how they deal with group boards, I don't, well, not that that's more severe, but I think that they're worried about other things at the moment, like scaling and all the popularity that they have, and then they're going to work slowly on fixing these issues. And in fact, something that we didn't put into our notes is, you might have seen that they've revised their terms of service. Mm-hmm. Did you see that this week?
Yeah, I did see that. I didn't have a chance to take a look through the revised terms of service, but I saw, sort of a couple of different blogs that covered it, and it sounds like they're really trying to combat this issue of copyrighted material and making sure that if somebody wants to prevent their stuff from going up on Pinterest, that they can easily do so.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little of that, but it was also a little of the thing that I saw in their initial kind of notes on their blog post that stood out was they were also trying to, they were making those tools to make it easier for you to report copyrighted content being shared that you didn't want to have shared, but also that they clearly stated that previously it just was boilerplate, I think, and said, any content you post here, we own. And they've removed that now and said, no, that's not what we're into doing. That shouldn't have been in our terms of service. And they took that out. Those types of things, you can see that they've been around for a couple of years, and now suddenly they're addressing those sort of things. Mm-hmm. And that's likely been in their terms of service for the whole entire two years or whatever, since they founded the site.
Right.
So they're getting to it. And this guy, I think even in the post says, hey, there's a limited life to what I'm doing here.
Right. But
I'm happy to be making around $1,000 a day, up until, they find a way to shut me down. So again, worst case scenario, the guy is infringing on their terms of service. Beyond that, I think it's all good.
Yeah. And, I think the macro point to this is, first off, don't trust everything you see on the main page, because it, for now at least, can be gamed. But I think more importantly and more related to our topic is that, there's always going to be somebody that's figured out some way of temporarily gaming the system, or, created some network of bots to mass follow his accounts. And so suddenly, you've been putting in the effort, and this guy in 24 hours manages to have more followers or more repins than you. But eventually those types of things get blocked, or those types of systems break down. And, I think that it's easy to sort of want to take the easy way out and say, oh, well, I'll just go search and find some sort of bot and do the same thing he's doing to promote my own content. But I think in general, there's the easy way is not very often the best way. And, you need to sort of keep in mind that playing by the rules and just, doing the best that you can, but still doing, just doing what a normal user does and not trying to game the system in the long term is going to work out better for you. You're going to have, more real followers on your account. You're not going to be up at night worried about, tomorrow is my account going to be there? Are they going to catch on and suddenly delete my account and all this work that I put into it? So, it can be tempting to see a story like this and say, oh, well, now I need to game the system too in order to just stay even. But I think the best way to make sure that you're, not losing out on a lot of effort overnight when they catch on and take action against you is just to play by the rules and do your best and see what happens.
I think he's just looking for a quick buck, right? And I don't think any of our listeners are looking for a quick buck, especially with if you're in business, you're not looking for the change that he's making over a week or two period of time. That you're in it for the long haul, and you definitely don't want to have your brand associated with this sort of action.
Yeah.
So,
but that that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't, like we said, always be experimenting. It doesn't mean that you can't be trying new things. And one of the brands that actually did something really interesting recently was Kotex. And they created what they called Inspiration Day. And what this was is they actually went out and found influential Pinterest users that they wanted to engage with. So people that they felt would be receptive to their brand and had, a relatively high following on Pinterest. And they followed those accounts for a while and figured out through Pinterest what those users liked. And then they actually put together 50 custom gift boxes that were customized to the interests that user had indicated. And then they messaged that person and said, hey, we've got this really cool gift box for you. Let us know if you're interested and let us know where to send it. And according to them, response was, tremendous to this. And I think that's to be expected. It was really a cool campaign. And we'll include a link to the video that walks through this case study in the show notes. And you can see, they actually had an artist come in and hand paint things that they would send out. And it was really a neat initiative that they had created there. But I think that's a great example of, playing by the rules, but still doing interesting things, doing things that make your brand stand out. And not only, getting a lot of attention inside of Pinterest, but this was covered by mainstream blogs as well, which always helps to broaden your audience and get that program in front of additional people as well.
Yeah, I mean, they use Pinterest as a gateway, right, to get to know folks. And so they did it. They used it in a different way than what everybody else is trying. Oh, let's see how much reach I can get for my content. And it wasn't about getting reach for their content, at least initially. It was about using Pinterest to get to know folks, and they were identifying influencers and identifying what their interests were via Pinterest. And then, and as you said, they went ahead and recreated stuff that they saw based on the style that these folks seemed to really kind of show off in all of their boards. Said, okay, well, look, this person likes this kind of stuff. This person likes this. Let's create this care package, send it off to them. And so they took digital marketing and turned it into carbon-based marketing, right? They brought it into the real world. And then again, it looped back around. And as they say in the video, then these folks went ahead and showed off their care packages, which of course had the Kotex brand associated with them and such, on their Pinterest account. And then they say, and on their Facebook account, and they tweeted about it, and on Instagram. And so their efforts not only bled back into what they were doing on Pinterest with these influential folks that they connected with, but also these folks were in general socially active, social media, savvy, and went ahead and spread their experience in this content. And I think they said out of the 50 folks, I think they said every single one of them shared something someplace.
Yeah. At least one place, if not, multiple places.
Yeah, and so they kind of show you some metrics at the end where they said, out of these many people, this is how many, I think it was like impressions we had and how many interactions we had and stuff. And so it's really interesting, I think, what they did. And, I commend them for taking the online offline first instead of solely depending on the digital realm as their way of communicating and interacting with these folks.
Yeah, definitely. And, in the same way that that mass follow bots that the previous story used have been around for a long time, the idea of finding influencers and giving them your product along with maybe a couple of other goodies, that's not a new idea. That's an idea that's been around for a long time, but it's just an idea that Kotex was the first to apply to this new medium. So in the same way, you can say, oh, well, somebody's just reusing the bot idea that's been around, for Twitter and blogs and all that. There's also a lot of previous ideas that are good that you could apply to Pinterest and look back and say, okay, well, what worked in the early days of Twitter? What worked in the early days of blogging? What worked in the early days of podcasting? And are there things that, we sort of forgot because, oh, well, everybody did that on Twitter, but at the same time, now we've got Pinterest, which is this new medium, and maybe there's some life left in those ideas when they're just applied to this new audience. And I've got to assume there's a number of influencers on Pinterest that sort of have this newfound audience that they haven't had previously. Maybe they were an early user and they got featured on the featured user list, and now they've got a few 100,000 followers on Pinterest, but it's not the same audience that also has a few 100,000 followers on Twitter and a few 100,000 monthly blog readers. These are people who Pinterest is now their main outlet, and they're getting recognition for that. And so it's really, a new audience and a new way of reaching people. So I think that's really interesting.
And speaking of kind of a new medium and new way of reaching people, there's a handful of new management and measurement platforms that seem to be making their rounds. If not completely available to the public yet, they're definitely kind of creating some buzz as ways to help measure and manage and monitor Pinterest.
Yeah.
And so a few of them popped up on our radar. And in fact, after I gave you a couple, you tossed a couple my way as well. What do you think of that? I mean, it was bound to happen, right?
I know. It was funny. As soon as the floodgates opened, it felt like every day there was a new one. And I'm sure there's even some out there that we haven't even discovered yet that are early betas or not even public yet. But a couple that we came across were a service called Pinnerly, a service called Pintix, and both of those are exclusively focused on Pinterest analytics and Pinterest engagement. And then there was also one called Curelate, which is a little broader, but when I was going through it, it really felt like a Pinterest engagement dashboard that had also been expanded out to, Twitter and Facebook, because
they call it kind of they go into the language trying to call it like a, that discovery is the new social, and that Pinterest is what's driving that, and therefore they are kind of like the new management and engagement platform for this kind of social discovery medium. And Pinterest right now is what they're considering, kind of the driving force around it.
Right. And I think my feeling overall towards tools like this is that it's probably a little early to be utilizing a tool in order to, pull analytics out of Pinterest and try to optimize your pins and say, oh, of the 5 pins that I put on this board, which one is the most popular and which one has the most repins. In general, I've seen even some of the more popular brands on Pinterest only have, maybe 10, 20, 30,000 followers, which is, realistically probably something that you can kind of manage by hand. And so I think it's, potentially a little early to already want to hand off all of the analytic duties to a third-party service. I think that kind of removes you from Pinterest. And because Pinterest is changing so rapidly now, it's something that, there are advantages to staying very hands-on and staying up to date as it's making changes and as the community kind of evolves. So I'm a little cautious of brands saying, oh, well, now I'll just, fire up this service, and once a day I'll get an email with tips on what's working, and I can, modify my behavior based on that. The other reason I say it's probably a little early is that, we're seeing 3 of these things pop up already, and like I said, I'm sure there's more. And so there's going to be a little bit of a shakeout as we figure out which one of these has talented teams behind it, and which one of these is sort of just rushed out to take advantage of the craziness surrounding Pinterest right now, but really doesn't have a solid team behind it, and in a couple months may not still be around. So I would say unless you're the earliest of early adopter brands, keep an eye on it and maybe look around and try to see if people try out these services and report back on what's working and what's not. But let other people be the guinea pigs for these services, and let other people, use it and give their opinion and say, hey, this worked. I'm getting a lot of added value out of this. Or, hey, I'm getting all this data, but I have no idea what to do with it. And I thought all I had to do is repin things. And now it seems like there's more to it than I want to get involved with.
Well, I would disagree, Corey.
All right, that's fine.
So I would like to know, what would the risk be by, no matter how early these folks are in their product development, what would the risk be in doing that, especially if we're encouraging folks to always be experimenting, and we have these brands like Kotex and others that are starting to finally find interesting ways of using it? Wouldn't it make sense for them, even at the most basic level, to try to also be experimenting with how to kind of measure and monitor?
I guess so. I mean, it feels like already it's a 3-dog race, which means that, potentially you've got a 33% chance of picking the one that turns out to be the best.
Or you sign up for all of them.
But then, you're putting a lot of time into Pinterest, and does monitoring your daily report from Pinterly, Pintix, and Curalate take you away from time that you could be spending on, making sure that your Twitter channel is up to date, or that you've, engaged with your Facebook community? I think that, keeping track of 3 separate services is potentially a lot of work. You've got to learn the nuances of the 3 services to make sure you're really getting the most value out of them. Because the trick to these, and it's true for a lot of analytics services, is that you can't just click the authorize button and then walk away and expect it to do all the work for you. You really need to understand the data that it's returning, understand, what you need to be changing or what you need to be optimizing based on that data. So, I think it makes sense if you want to try one to evaluate the 3, and I would say pick one of them and really dive into that one and learn the nuances of it and learn how to optimize your use of it. But at the same time, I think that for most brands, it doesn't feel like they have enough followers at this point to be nitpicky, to be that nitpicky about the data. I would say just being on Pinterest and paying attention to what anecdotally feels like it's working and what feels like it's not is probably enough, until you've got, tens of thousands of followers, and it becomes hard to just keep track of, yesterday I posted this and it only got 5 pins. Today I posted that and it got 10 pins. Obviously my audience likes, the second thing that I pin more than the first.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that stuff. I do though think that, when it comes to any service that's out there, whether it's mature or not, you're going to jump in, and especially if, for instance, you have the ability to use a free demo or whatever, you're going to jump in and you're going to use it and you're going to play with it and figure out what works right for you or what feels good for you after any given amount of time. And in a lot of ways, you'll be able to tell that quite quickly right up front. It was the way that's the way it was for me, for instance, with doing research and picking out a CRM and a social one that supported social media, and even in the past in picking a Twitter platform. I think when it comes to kind of like letting the race eliminate the poor candidates, that might be a while before that happens. So, I mean, I don't know. I think the way that things are going right now with Pinterest, that it might behoove a few folks to not just kind of jump in and test it out. Spend a weekend playing with things and see what feels right. And I agree with you. Don't sit there and let it ride for a month in order to feel that stuff out, because you're likely going to waste a lot of time and time that you would probably have best spent doing other things that are currently working. But I don't know. I would encourage folks to take a look. I think right now, for instance, a lot of folks don't have a frame of reference, as to how they could measure Pinterest, besides just looking at the pretty obvious stuff like how many comments am I getting or how many repins am I getting. But with every single social network, for instance, out there, or social media platform, there are different ways of attributing success based on different sorts of measurements. Everything from whether it's a comment to a like to to a repin. Those things all have different context depending on what your goals are. And I think that some of these platforms may or may not have thought about how to articulate what what means success, or not necessarily what means success, but how Pinterest measurement works. Where some folks, I think, at face value, don't maybe quite understand how to attribute that. I'm really interested, for instance, to find something, and maybe I haven't looked hard enough myself directly at Pinterest, but to find something that would be able to properly communicate to me the reach of my pins. So if I'm the originator of a pin, that pin originates with me and then continues to travel, right? It's just like I'm the originator of a tweet, and then there's a reach factor. Where if I go ahead and I tweet something, I'm the originator, and then somebody with 5,000 followers tweets it, and then 5 of their followers turn around and tweet it, and so on and so on. Well, there's this kind of the metric of reach that's been attached to that, and there's all kinds of sub metrics under that, like, well, how many retweets did it have to get to that much reach? And from there, was there any additional followers that came from that, and so on? And with Pinterest right now, I don't believe there's an effective way to find out, for instance, if I go ahead and seed it with an original pin, what's the actual reach of that content, so I can quantify that.
Right. And part of that is, I may be wrong on this, but from my understanding, Pinterest actually hasn't opened up their API. At one point, they had an API that people were able to tap into, but when it got popular, they, in my opinion, probably smartly turned that off and said, well, let's make sure that our API actually works before we put it out into the wild. They sort of learned lessons from Twitter in that regard. Twitter, I think, when they put out their API, probably weren't ready for the response that would get, and so it caused a lot of problems with the service. So it feels like a lot of these tools are either attempting kind of backdoor access to get some of that data, or they're trying to work with Pinterest to get access to that API. But I'd imagine the API isn't high up on the list of priorities for Pinterest at the moment. They're probably firing away on things like an iPad app, which has a better ROI for them, versus an API, when, really most people are perfectly fine to just use Pinterest through Pinterest.com and don't need to access it elsewhere.
Yeah, I did talk to the Pinterly guys, and it seems like they were initially using, I don't know if they were doing backdoor access or what, but it sounds like the reason their product hasn't launched as quickly as others, or they might have hoped, was because Pinterest did change their API. So it sounds like there is some access happening. How long ago they got that access, I'm not sure.
Yeah. It also feels a little bit. It feels a little bit like these are just too narrowly focused of tools. So both of these brands have already tied themselves pretty exclusively to Pinterest. You've got Pinterly and Pintix, which have the word pin in the name. It's much like some of the early Twitter tools that came out, and they were like, oh, we're now the twee something or other. They just added the prefix twee to whatever their name was going to be and called themselves a Twitter tool. And then when they realized, well, hey, we want to do Facebook analytics as well, they had to rebrand themselves and sort of reconfigure their entire system. So, sure, Pinterly and Pintix are getting a lot of coverage now because they're the first out of the gate to claim to offer Pinterest analytics. But my feeling is that as soon as the API opens up and, everyone has access to building tools on top of the Pinterest backend, that the big boys of the social media analytics and monitoring world will come in and say, hey, thanks for playing around, but we're just going to add Pinterest into our otherwise already built out and well-developed tool, and it'll be part of an overall social media management platform. But we're not going to worry just about Pinterest. We're going to let you manage Pinterest next to the way that you manage Twitter, next to the way that you manage Facebook, and do it all in one dashboard versus having to fire up Pinterly to get your Pinterest analytics and then go elsewhere for your other analytics.
I agree with that. I think, though, I think that Pinterest is a bit of a different beast because of the images and such. And so I think, like, for instance, these few folks that are starting out right now, there's an advantage to kind of, I think eventually they could either be acquired or, somebody could just look at it and go, hey, that looks like the right way to do it, and then fold it into their service. But it's going to take a little bit to fold it into a service like Hootsuite or others out there that, I just think that the model of Pinterest is different than just a strictly stream based, platform like Facebook or of course Twitter. So it'll be interesting. I mean, obviously we're having a great discussion about it here, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out in the end. I'd like to see some of the platforms just to see what kind of information would be gleaned. These new measurement platforms, and again, it sounds like a few of them are still they're getting some play only because I think that they are available for Pinterest, and Pinterest obviously is such a big deal to folks right now.
Right.
But over time, they're just all coming out of the woodwork. They're all competing with each other, and they're all kind of these unique groups of folks who are somehow trying to beat all the other big cats out there that are already doing measurement and management, and there'll be this kind of meeting in the middle where suddenly these guys are when the API opens, just like you said, it'll be all kind of over at that point.
Yeah.
But between now and then, I'm still very interested in checking it out, and I think people should, if you have a little extra time, should investigate. But I think to what Corey's saying is just, don't waste too much time on it, because the kinks and the bugs are all going to be getting worked out while you use it.
Right.
And in time, those will be worked out when it all matures, and by that time, some of these other folks will have it available.
Yeah, and I mean, full disclosure, I'm on this. I signed up for the beta list of all of these services because I do consider myself an early adopter. So I'll be jumping in. I'll be checking them out as soon as I get access to it. I'm not gonna lie about that. I'm like you, always interested to be on the cutting edge and try to get sneak peek into what's coming. So I think that I myself do feel that pull towards, hey, this is a new tool, let's check it out. I just think that if you're not that person that's always checking out new stuff and always looking for, hey, even if it doesn't work perfectly right now, I just like to see what's coming. If you're the type of person that's a little more hands off with your social media, then, maybe just wait a week or two, let the early adopters take a crack at it, and then, and then look around and say, okay, well, what are the initial reports? Where should I sort of focus my energy?
Well, we talked about Pinterest a lot, and I think we've got all the Pinterest stuff out of our system, right?
I think so. But, good segue, actually, because much as we just discussed these analytics services tying themselves to one platform, there was actually an interesting story that you had unearthed that was talking about the difference between Facebook and a blog for businesses, and the reasons that you may not want to only tie your horse to the Facebook cart. And I thought this was actually a good post. So maybe you could walk us through a couple of the reasons and what specifically caught your eye as being a good reason to maybe consider a blog over Facebook?
Yeah, I mean, and of course the post is not showing up for me right now, but the discussion has happened a lot. I think I've heard it quite a bit in regards to people trying to decide where if they want to hang their hat on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever. There's always this discussion as if you have to choose only one, as if there's some unwritten law or some secret thing that forces you to have to choose just one social network to market yourself.
Wait, are you saying that I didn't have to shut off Twitter the second that I opened up my Pinterest account?
I know.
Was I wrong on that?
I mean, we've heard, for instance, a lot of people when Google Plus came out, they did that too, right?
Ooh, that is true.
They turn around and said, hey, well, now we have Google Plus, and Google Plus allows us to post like 5,000 words, and 5,000 words is more than any of us will ever need to post on our blog, and so we could use it as our blog, and it's right where the discussion is. And I think that's a bunch of kind of horsepucky in my mind.
Yeah, I agree.
I think, I mean, how did people feel, for instance, when Facebook changed to the timeline view for your pages? Some people love it. A lot of people were a little upset about it. Eventually, they'll all be fine with it, just like they usually are when any changes happen. But the bottom line is that people don't have control. Right, there is very little control over what can happen and the changes that are made when these social networks and platforms they're businesses, and they change sometimes due to the needs of their users and sometimes not.
Yeah.
And so when you end up betting the farm on that and putting them all on these platforms, you kind of get what you pay for in that sense, which is nothing in most cases.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to Facebook, especially because people think of how many users are on Facebook, and that because of that, they should just basically put everything on Facebook. This goes to the notion of social commerce, which we've discussed in the past. So, right, we've discussed about how successful or not successful some of these big brands have been, and even smaller brands have been at actually trying to duplicate a store onto Facebook. Mm-hmm. And the same can be said for having a kind of a social home base for your business. And I only know a few of the ones that were mentioned in this infographic. And I'm trying to bring it up, and unfortunately, I keep getting an error on my end.
I can go through those real quick if you want. And it's funny,
yeah. And I'll comment on it a little bit because I got my 2 cents to share on it. But yeah, if you could share a couple of the ones that you felt were most important.
All right, and starting with number 10, which is funny, I thought you would actually manage to pull it up because number 10 is stability, which talks about the fact that Facebook changes fast and furious, and a lot of times it might not be changes in the direction that you would like it to go. Versus a blog, which you have full control over, so it only changes when you want to. It's stable, it's consistent, and it's dependable. And then just running down through the list real quick. So number 9 was bigger payoff versus Facebook, where you may or may not see success. Blog, that the time that you're putting into it is always going to pay off. Number 8 is SEO benefits. There are a lot of SEO benefits to having your own blog, and a lot of additional benefits to hosting that blog on your own site versus driving traffic towards Facebook.com. Number 7 is a long shelf life. The fact that blog posts, months and sometimes even years after they initially go live, will still be driving traffic and still be bringing in a new audience. Number 6 is the news feed, and this one was a big one. Facebook decides who sees your updates, and as we've learned, sometimes only 15% of those fans that you've acquired are going to see your update at any one time, versus a blog where that everyone can see all of your content at any time. Number 5 is Content Hub. So a blog can serve as a hub for all types of content, while Facebook only helps you distribute and promote your content that lives inside of the Facebook world.
I got it up, by the way, so keep going.
Perfect. Number 4, offer more value. So Facebook fans will only like your brand if they think you have something to offer, but on your blog, you can give more value via helpful tips, advice, and teaching them new things. Number 3 is more clicking. A compelling link on your blog will more likely be clicked, while a link to your Facebook page will most likely be ignored. It's debatable, but it's up there.
I agree. It's debatable.
Number 2, reach multiple audiences. So via your blog, you've got RSS, you've got email, you've got site visitors, and all the social networks that can drive traffic into your blog. Versus Facebook, you've only got the Facebook audience. And finally, the number 1 and most important reason is control. So you have full control over a blog, while Mark Zuckerberg has full control over Facebook.
So I will jump in here real quick on a couple things.
All right.
I mean, the SEO, you kind of stuck on that for a second when you initially talked about it, and that's pretty big and obvious, especially when it comes to the fact that if you want to drive traffic to your site or to a place where you're selling your products or whatever, it's not Facebook you have to make happy. It's actually Google that you have to make happy. Mm-hmm. And the other search engines, if anybody actually still uses a lot of them, which they do. But you want to increase your SEO of your site. And if you don't have fresh content, if you don't have a place where you can publish content and can share stuff, and also, they're thinking of blogging in kind of a one-dimensional way with this. When you go to where it is the number 4, offering more value, But your blog can give them more value via helpful tips, advice, and teaching them new things. Like, it really makes it sound pretty cheesy, actually.
Right.
I mean, a blog is a publishing platform on your website. And so it can do everything from tracking conversions to putting up, documents. So placing content, not in just in the form of text, but everything from white papers to videos or any other files that you want to give out to folks to entice them to interact with you or to build brand affinity with your company.
Yep. The well-known Solo Mo show is actually hosted on a blog.
Yeah, exactly. Even
you can host a podcast there.
Even though we're on Facebook as well, but Facebook is an extension of it. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I'm a firm believer that a blog is the place to. It is your home base. I mean, I've been trying to find a better word beyond home base or better term beyond home base. I think that it's just basically the bottom line is the blog is your home base, whereas your site is going to be static likely. It's not going to change. If it does, it's every quarter, every 6 months, every year, if that. And when you have a blog, you have a platform that is optimized for publishing. Mm-hmm. And publishing is not just text content. It's anything you want to do. And beyond just publishing content, meaning writing posts, there are so many things that you can do to optimize the experience around your blog that there's no way that you can do on Facebook. You can do some things on Facebook that are really interesting and fun, and you can play with Facebook data, but you have to do a lot more to make it work, and you have to have development resources. This is coming from a person who has a company that does that, and so I'm a firm believer still, and I don't remember if it was you. I think it was somebody else. Where I think it was a friend of mine who said, I think it was Steve Farnsworth. A friend of mine, we were talking about it just the other day, and he said, well, but do you mean blogs aren't dead?
Right.
Because, there's always this discussion about whether blogs are alive or dead. And I think if you're an early adopter, you're on the quote unquote cutting edge, and that's all you want to, you just want to be known for being on the cutting edge. Well, you're not in it for business. You're in it for notoriety, about, always using the latest and greatest stuff. But for the average business and brand, a blog just simply makes sense. It's like saying, let's close our website because our website is old. It's not useful, and let's just completely build again a store on Facebook.
Yeah,
it's already been proven that it doesn't work the way that we would hope so, simply because the audience is there. There's an intention behind those users on certain social networks. There's a whole different culture at play. They're not there for buy-in. I mean, again, it just gets down to some other stuff that we've discussed in the past. But in the end, I'm really, really bullish about blogs being for most businesses, for a majority of businesses, a good home-based platform. And the reasons you would use a blog could be different for every single business. Whether it be thought leadership or to increase brand affinity or to have a content hub where you can drive traffic to and ultimately kind of drive that traffic to places on your website, whether it's just for communication, so for product announcements and things like that. There are so many different things that different types of companies would use it for. I think it's just a versatile, awesome place to build your home base.
Yeah, and one of the ones that rang especially true for me was the idea of blogs having a long shelf life. And, I think just run a Google search for pretty much anything and you can see this for yourself. Put in a keyword and look at what shows up on the first page of Google. And, it's, of course, there are a couple things that were recently posted, but a lot of times you'll find things that were posted, 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago that are still showing up on the first page of Facebook, which means they're still driving a ton of traffic. The first page of Google versus Facebook, where, really anything that's older than about 24 hours is for most part gone. Nobody, I guess this could be debatable, but nobody's really looking back through the timeline to say, oh, what did this brand have to say 3 weeks ago?
It takes a heck of a lot of effort to do it. I mean, they've been talking about the couple brands who have started using the timeline over the last month as they've rolled it out. In a more creative ways, and it takes a lot of effort to drive folks and say, hey, we're doing a contest, or hey, look back at the history of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
That it's a new behavior that folks are still not doing, and I don't know if folks will begin to do that when it comes to the fan pages. There's some stuff that's come out recently that says something about the Facebook timeline has created up to a 46% increase in engagement for some brands. But still, just like you said, it takes a heck of a lot more effort to drive people to engage with past content. And you don't see, I mean, number 11 on this list of 10 things should be your blog doesn't have to fight with Mark Zuckerberg or Sergey Brin or, Biz and the guys that work over at Twitter. The founders are all butting heads about how the social networks are going to integrate and work together. And your blog doesn't have to fight with folks like that. Your blog is a neutral party. It doesn't have to deal with it. If you want Facebook content to come in, cool. If you want Twitter content to come in, cool. Nobody has to be, negotiating. Like we saw, Google was getting social content, social results from Twitter. Then suddenly they didn't have an agreement going on or whatever it was. They, one person didn't grab the bill when it came to paying for lunch or something. and then suddenly the social results were gone from Google.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about that in most cases, in 99% of the cases with your blog. And that's just the bottom line for people to always remember. I guess that goes to the stability thing that you covered in number 10.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of wrap this up, we're both obviously proponents of Facebook overall. I think this is definitely not intending to. We don't intend the takeaway of this to be, oh well, I should just shut down my Facebook page. That doesn't make any sense anymore. It's more saying that you shouldn't focus all of your effort on Facebook if it means you don't have any time left over to do something like a blog or, to focus efforts on a channel that you really have ultimate control over. Make sure that the majority of your effort is going towards something that you have control over, that, has benefits like SEO and a longer shelf life. And that, whether that's a blog or, podcast or something like that. And then if you have time left over, look at something like Facebook or look at something like Twitter as a way of extending your reach. But don't put all your eggs in the Facebook basket in hopes that that's going to pay off for you, because, ultimately there could be changes that in a very short amount of time really alter the effectiveness of all the time and effort that you've put into something like Facebook. So I think find a good balance and don't forget that, even though blogs have been around for a long time and they're not the sexy new thing that's grabbing news headlines all the time, there's still plenty of people out there that look to blogs for their content. And there's still, a massive audience out there that you can reach through a really well thought through business blog.
If we have any listeners that are listening right now on the live stream, which we do during our show, I'd love to hear you guys, your opinions on this, which you could share on Twitter, or you could share it on our Facebook page if you go to Facebook and search for the Solo Mo Show. And for those that listen to it when it's recorded and up online, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. I just wanted to toss that in there.
Yeah, definitely. So again, tying your effort and tying your features into something that's controlled by someone else. What about the story that you brought up of social logins and how they affect e-commerce? So social logins and social sharing and how those can affect a company's e-commerce. I thought this was an interesting study, though I kind of questioned some of the data, so I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it.
We talked ahead of time about some of the data points. Is it all the data that you kind of question, or is it just some selective points?
I think it's selective, though. There were a couple instances that I had questions about, which kind of makes me question then the overall trueness of this post. I think maybe a couple to call out were, they've got this stat that has the average number of page views, and there's 3 columns that it breaks down into. So consumers who cannot comment or share using their social identities have an average of 4 page views, versus consumers who share content using a social login, they have an average of 11 page views when they're on a site. And consumers who can comment using a social login, they also have 11. So basically, you're getting 4 page views out of someone who can't use social to log in and share through your site. And that actually jumps almost 2.5 times to 11 page views out of a user when they can either comment or share using their social platform. And, why this makes me question the data is, is it users that log in and share something? Do they suddenly view more pages? Or is it that the person who logs in and is clicking around enough to get to 11 pages on a single view is more likely to find something that they want to share and then go through the process of logging in and actually sharing that?
Yeah, I mean, that particular section of it makes it sound like the act of it's kind of like the driver to share folks who are logged in with Facebook, and when you're adding some sort of when you're adding the ability to have a social discussion with specifically Facebook, or the ability to click, share and share a product, similar to what folks are kind of in a way doing now, right, with Pinterest, but also do with Facebook here and there and other social networks. That just the option to do that somehow drives more page views.
Right, and I think it's a question of which direction do the numbers lead. So if you give someone the opportunity to log in and share, are they more likely to view additional pages? Or is it that people who view additional pages are more likely to log in and share?
True. And in the end, what it all boils down to is who's going to spend the most money. I mean, if you're going to go ahead and we're talking about, e-commerce here. So if somebody is looking at only 4 pages, maybe they know what they want and they just get to it. And when it comes to the additional page views, I guess the benefit, of course, with that is that hopefully they're sharing X amount of items along the way, and they're extending the reach of the content that you have, and kind of what do you say, strengthening the discoverability of your content, your products. But it doesn't necessarily translate exactly into increased dollars just because there's more page views.
Right.
Well, I mean, do you agree with that, or am I missing something? Yeah,
I think that makes sense. It's, those numbers aren't necessarily related to the commerce side of a site. Is somebody who's sharing something, by its very nature, they're not purchasing it, they're sharing it. They're thinking, somebody else might like to purchase this, and so they go and share it. And maybe that share happens post-purchase, and it says, thanks for shopping with us. If you'd like to share this purchase with your friends, click here to do so. And that's when it's happening. But, my instinct tells me that it's probably more likely somebody who's just browsing around and, has sort of that Pinterest mentality of, one day I'd like this, or hey, this is cool, but I'm not actually pulling out my credit card. I'm just looking to share it with others.
Well, and it says directly on here, it says social login and social sharing can have a dramatic impact on how long your customers stay on your website, creating more opportunities for you to present the right message to the right person at the right time. And so what they're saying is, look, the longer they stay on the site, the more opportunities you have to present to them whatever it is that you're trying to do. So they're trying to kind of take it at just that face value right there. And if they end up sharing your content, well, that's great. They help other folks discover that content. We I think it was last episode where we covered the new social metrics for Google Analytics. Mm-hmm. And of course, right now, really, it's only supported by a certain. Google is only supporting certain social networks, and most of them are not the major ones. They're all, like Dig and Reddit, and some of those that aren't really associated with social commerce or purchasing products or whatever like that. But if say Facebook was included in that, then this would likely be something that that you'd be able to measure using those social metrics and see, well, how was your content being shared? Where was the reach? What was the sale after somebody had, like you just said, somebody liked something and said, hey, I'd love to take a look at this later. This is kind of on my wish list. But at that given moment, they just weren't ready to make the purchase. It might be easier to measure those sorts of things with something like the new social metrics in place, if it supported Twitter or Facebook or something like that.
Yeah.
I think the most telling information here really is about kind of the power of Facebook when it comes to when given an opportunity to log in with a social network, that Facebook is kind of out in front. And you could let me know what you think about the data on it, but it has Facebook as being, let's see, here are the social logins shoppers use most. 60% Facebook. And then the next down the line is 12% with Yahoo, which is interesting as well, just to even, think about Yahoo really being a contender out here. But it is. Mm-hmm. And most of them are all kind of neck and neck with each other, 12%, 11% with Twitter, and 10% with Google, and then 7% with LinkedIn. I don't know how you would, why you would necessarily jump and use LinkedIn if really you weren't using social media that much, and maybe the only thing you did was have a professional profile on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and, again, that was one that sort of caught me off guard as like 12% for Yahoo versus 11% for Twitter. Really? Is this, where are they getting this data from? Because, focus group of one, if I ever see a social login button, it's Facebook and Twitter are the two options that sites give you as a way to log in. And I can't even remember the last time that I've even seen a site that uses Yahoo as their social login data. So it makes me wonder if they counted like sites that are hosted on Yahoo. Like, I think Yahoo actually has a sort of retail platform.
Yeah, it does. It's had for years. And
yeah, so it's like, platform. Are those 12% just, 12% of people sign up and buy something through Yahoo, and so therefore they use the Yahoo button by default? That one kind of stood out. And then, again, the 7% of LinkedIn users, like that to me feels definitely not connected to a purchase funnel. That feels like, well, maybe if you're logging in through LinkedIn to post a comment somewhere or to, share something back to your LinkedIn profile. But I don't think a lot of people share, hey, I want to purchase this new couch. It's more, I want to share this infographic that I saw or this really good blog post that I feel like it relates to my business. So, those numbers did feel a little funky as well, though I agree that the macro point of Facebook is dominating above and beyond any of the other networks is definitely true, and that one feels like regardless of what the specific numbers are, that is most likely the case, that Facebook has just run away with the social login race. The other number that stood out as a little funny is it said 40% of consumers, or 2 out of every 5 for people that don't know what 40% means, prefer social logins over creating a new/guest account, which on the flip side means that 60% prefer to create their own new/guest account versus logging in with Facebook when presented the option. So this infographic, despite saying, social login and how it affects e-commerce, then actually goes on to say, well, 60% of people just prefer to create their own account and don't actually want to sign in with Facebook, which is,
in other words, a majority, right?
A majority, exactly. So, then they've got a stat that says 28% of people use social logins in 2010 versus 41% in 2011. I kind of wonder if that's just due to more sites offering social logins as an option. So, I think overall, there were just a number of places where I questioned the data and
It's just how it's displayed, right?
want to poke holes in it. Yeah, but maybe the macro point of there are still a pretty decent size number of users. It maybe not the majority just yet, but there's still a sizable amount of your traffic that wants at least the option to sign in with a social sign-in button. And maybe they're not going to use it, or if they do use it, it's just because they want to share something back to that network. But at least taking the steps to be familiar with some of these services and familiar with what it would take to integrate, let's say, a Facebook login option into your purchase flow is probably worth taking, even if just so that you are prepared if at some point in the future these numbers change and the majority of people are looking to a service like Facebook for their login option versus just creating a unique account for that site.
Agreed.
All right. Well, what do you say we wrap it up with one final story about Twitter launching their self-serve ad platform?
No, I don't want to. No.
It's not very interesting, right? Twitter, it's just this small network. Nobody really pays attention to it.
As we've discussed before, they're kind of the laggards when it comes to finally rolling stuff out.
Yes, indeed.
And so I was really actually hyped when I saw this headline pop across. It just popped across the my Twitter stream and Facebook, and I think it was on TechMeme and all this stuff. And I said, "Oh, awesome, great! Wait, I got to be a member of American Express right now? Are you kidding me?"
Well, I think it's two things. It's either you have an American Express card that you can use to purchase the ad, or it's my understanding that if you are a business that accepts American Express, you can also sign up for Twitter advertising, which means that I think a lot of people can sneak through because services like Square or PayPal can accept American Express. So I think you can sort of claim, oh, sure, I accept American Express, even if you haven't set up a more formal credit card processing system.
So you did you watch the video that they had?
I didn't get a chance to check it out.
I mean, they just do a very basic explanation of what it is that they're offering, and they're essentially offering either the sponsored profiles or sponsored tweets,
right?
Which is common stuff that we see. And so for those that don't know, a sponsored profile means that when you look on the side, there's almost always something that says who to follow or suggested folks to follow. So if you just go directly to your homepage on Twitter, you'll see on the left-hand side it says who to follow, and there's a number of people there. And so that's some of those folks, the ones that say promoted under it, are people that actually pay to be featured there. Now, if you go down to, say, one of the trending topics or even do a search, so for instance, right now I kind of have this open and, they're talking about the Dodgers thing that's going on now with Magic Johnson, kind of we discussed pre-show. And this one actually does not have a promoted tweet on top, but in the past, I've seen that it will actually have a promoted tweet on top if somebody has bid to be visible around certain keywords and so on. And so it's very similar to what would be called sponsored stories on Facebook. And essentially what you're paying for is extended shelf life. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's really what you're paying for is extended shelf life. You might come up already for under the who to follow, and you might come up already under searches or in the general flow of Twitter of tweets if somebody is looking at a particular topic on search or not. I mean, maybe they're just following you. Mm-hmm. But what you're doing is paying for this extended shelf life so that you show up for more people in places you might not likely show up initially, and for a longer period of time.
So they've taken a page out of Facebook's ad playbook then, where hey, users may be following you, they may already be getting your update, but if you want to hand a little money our way, we'll guarantee that your content gets in front of people.
Yeah, and again, I mean, they don't have as many places to do it as Facebook, but yeah, they're doing just like what Facebook has done. I mean, we covered it a couple shows back where Facebook is doing it now on the logout page. They're doing it within the stream. They're doing it on the right-hand side. They're doing it in a few different forms and formats. And Twitter's, I think, playing a little bit of catch-up in the sense that it's not necessarily it's not necessarily having to be Facebook, but for most of these networks, even LinkedIn, for instance, has social ads. And what you're in those, LinkedIn is not actually they haven't jumped in this kind of foray of saying, look, if you pay us, we're going to make sure that whatever you post on your stream in LinkedIn is going to stay up there longer and be viewed as promoted. Maybe they do that in the future. I don't think that that's their best way of monetizing things on their end personally.
Right.
But that's what Twitter's trying to do, and they're trying to make it accessible to anybody, small, medium-sized businesses, as well as the large companies that have been doing it for a period of time. For I don't know, it feels like it's been a couple of years, but I believe it's probably only been a little over a year that they've been doing that. So needless to say, it'll be interesting once they finally open it up to everybody, not just American Express users. And again, kudos to American Express for having this partnership. Again, they're doing other stuff with Twitter already, and they're doing other things with on the social web with Foursquare. And I think I might have jokingly mentioned to you that it almost makes me want to run out and get an American Express just so I could experiment with all this early access and cool stuff that they've been doing around all their deals and check-ins and tweets and so on. Anyways.
Kudos to American Express for locking that deal up, but question mark to Twitter for relying so heavily on that for the launch of their self-serve ad platform. I thought that was a very odd choice. It makes sense, some of these American Express promotions we've seen where they're like, hey, if you're a user and you've got an American Express card, now you can get deals through Twitter and through Foursquare. But for Twitter to restrict access to their self-serve ad platform to only those merchants that either accept American Express or actually use American Express felt like a very, very strange move. And I'm hoping that it's a very short-term move, and that maybe they're using this as a way to kind of test their self-service platform before opening it up to anyone and everyone that wants to run an ad. But it definitely caught me off guard as being like, wait, that's the restriction they placed on it. It's not.
You know about the backstory, right?
I don't know.
Twitter actually has an outstanding American Express bill. And so this was the trade-off that they did in order to get their bill cleared.
I gotcha. They're just paying it off one tweet at a time. Huh?
Exactly. That'll be the new commercial, right? American Express, don't tweet from home without it or something like that.
There you go. Nice. All right. Well, I feel like we covered quite a bit of news in this show, so maybe we should call it a wrap. What do you say?
Let's wrap it up.
All right. Perfect. So, as always, we want to thank everyone who has listened to this show. We really appreciate each and every one of you, and really hope that you get some value out of this. And we will continue to do our best to bring you the most interesting and most important news that you should keep an eye on. If you'd like to get in touch with us, we would definitely appreciate that. You can reach us on Twitter. The show is available at SoloMo Show, and both Adam and I check that, so feel free to reach out that way. Otherwise, you can reach us directly. I'm available at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi.
We also have pages on both Facebook and Google+. So if you are a user of those services, just go ahead and log on and search for SoloMo Show, and we should pop right up.
And we actually always forget to mention that we are on Pinterest as well.
We are on Pinterest, that is true. Well, both Adam and I have individual accounts, and then we've created a group board for the SoloMo Show, but the SoloMo Show does not have its own Pinterest account.
That's right.
Though if it did, it would probably find a lot of great pins. It's quite the social media star.
and if you so just Google, search on Pinterest for SoloMo if you feel so obliged, and you can look on there. In fact, we do have an account on YouTube, though.
This is true. Yes, we also have an account on YouTube, and both our Facebook and our Google Plus pages include YouTube videos of the shows. So if you just click through on one of those, that'll take you right to the YouTube page, and you can subscribe through there, or just search on YouTube for SoloMo Show, and again, we should show up.
It's not us chilling and on the videos talking all the time. It's the podcast with accompanied graphics and supporting images and stuff like that. Kind of, what is it? Is that Wolf Blitzer style? Is that it?
I don't know.
Am I thinking of the wrong name for the CNN? The guys of the CNN with the big, huge touchscreens. But we have accompanying images to all the stories that we do, so you could listen to it. You can also see the images at the same time to get some context as to what we're covering.
And the show notes are also available on a number of the channels. I think pretty much everything that we just mentioned includes the show notes. And then you can also view the show notes in your podcast player of choice or at solomoshow.com. That's where we host all of the episodes, and you can actually see all of the links that we've mentioned and click through if you'd like to see for yourself the links that we've mentioned. And if you'd like to use an old school method, we've mentioned a number of new school methods, but if you want to...
You can hit Corey on his beeper.
Exactly. Just page me on my celly. No, you can actually email us. The email you'd want to use there is solomoshow@gmail.com. Both Adam and I have access to that, so that's a easy way to reach either one of us. And feel free to... send us questions, send us comments, send us feedback, or just reach out and say hi. We would gladly accept any of those and would be happy to just get to know some of our audience and get an idea for what you like about the show, or maybe what you're looking forward to or would like to see more of. And finally, if we could make one request, it would be that if you like the show, go ahead and head on over to iTunes and give it a rating, hopefully a positive rating. That really helps us to get the word out there, help other people discover the show, and a bigger audience means that the next time you bring it up at a cocktail party, the person sitting across from you may also be a listener, so that has some added benefit for you as well. So we would
count on it.
Definitely appreciate any rating that you can give us on iTunes. And with that, I think we will call this one a wrap and see you guys next week. Thanks again for listening in.
Take care.